Now, from Washington, D.C., Raymond Arroyo.
Welcome to the World Over Live. The U.S. bishops are vowing to vigorously continue their fight against government restrictions on religious liberty. The announcement came after a meeting of the Bishops' Administrative Committee here in Washington, D.C. Joining us to share the latest is Chairman of the USCCB's Ad Hoc Committee on Religious Liberty, Bishop William Lori. And later, Father Robert Sirico of the Acton Institute will help me analyze the big news of the week, including the suspension of a Maryland priest who denied communion to an individual. We want you to be part of this program. If you have a question or a comment, the number is 1-800-221-9460 in the U.S. and internationally 205-271-2980, or drop us an email at worldover@ewtn.com. Let's get started. Here's the brief news from the world over this week. This week, the Department of Health and Human Services announced a new abortion surcharge. Under the rule, all enrollees in health exchanges offering abortion will be required to pay a separate abortion premium of no less than $1 a month. Individuals cannot opt out of the premium, and not unlike the accounting gimmick that ostensibly protected religious institutions from having to pay for the contraceptive mandate, taxpayers will not be paying for the abortion surcharge either. Instead, enrollees, individuals required by law to carry health insurance or be fined, will pay the monthly abortion premium. Money from the fund will be used by any individual in the plan seeking an abortion. And after a meeting of its top leaders here in D.C. on Wednesday, the U.S. Bishops' Conference has promised to continue its vigorous efforts against the HHS mandate. The bottom line for the bishops: this is a religious freedom issue. In a statement, the bishops decried the HHS rule as illegal and unjust, a mandate to act against our teachings and a violation of personal civil rights, they said. They further called the mandate an unwarranted defining of religion by government. More on the meeting of the USCCB's Administrative Committee and what's next in their fight for religious liberty in our next segment. And a new poll shows that President Barack Obama has lost support among women since the announcement of the federal contraceptive mandate. According to the New York Times CBS News poll, the president's approval rating has dropped 12 percentage points among women. That's 3 times the drop among men in the same poll in the same period. Political strategists anticipated that the contraceptive flap would galvanize the president's support among women and help his reelection. That might not be the case. On the mandate itself, strong majorities of both men and women voiced support for religious and moral exemptions to the rule. By a 57 to 36% margin, those surveyed agreed that religiously affiliated employers should be able to opt out of covering the cost of birth control and related drugs if they morally object. There's been another deadly church attack in Nigeria. On March 11th, a car bomb detonated during Mass outside St. Finbar's Catholic Church in Jos. 10 people were killed. Security at the entrance of the church compound stopped the suspicious car, but the bomber detonated the explosives during the confrontation. The blast also damaged the church's roof and blew out its windows. The radical Islamic sect Boko Haram is suspected to have been behind the attack. They've claimed responsibility for previous church bombings. The group announced last week to an Egyptian news agency that they would add kidnapping Christian women to their list of terrorist activities in order to, quote, strike fear into Christians of the power of Islam, end quote. And another humanitarian crisis looms in Sudan, as the country's Islamic majority government has removed citizenship from hundreds of thousands of Christians, and they're ordering them out of the country. According to Ecumenical News International, up to 700,000 former Sudanese citizens have less than a month to emigrate to a newly formed country of southern Sudan. The Sudanese government in February declared that those with any kind of familial or ethnic ties to southern Sudan, even those who've never lived there, are no longer considered citizens of Sudan. Auxiliary Bishop Daniel Adwak of Khartoum called the deadline almost impossible and insisted on the right of citizens to live where they wish. He is urging the country's respective parliaments to take up the issue. And in a related story, our friend and a regular on the world over, Bishop Makram Gassis of Sudan, has been nominated for the 2012 Nobel Peace Prize. Portuguese MP José Castro submitted Bishop Gassis's name to the Nobel Committee due to his long-standing struggle against the persecution of Christians in his embattled diocese. If anyone deserves the Nobel Peace Prize, it is certainly Bishop Gassis. We'll keep following this story for you. And as the British government on Thursday officially began to consider how it will legalize same-sex marriage in the UK, the Catholic Church in England and Wales has escalated its campaign against it. In a letter read during Sunday Mass at more than 25,000 parishes, 2,500 parishes rather, Archbishops Vincent Nichols and Peter Smith called on the faithful to help ensure that, quote, the true meaning of marriage is not lost for future generations. The bishops argued that current law is not discriminatory, but simply recognizes and protects the distinctive nature of marriage between one man and one woman focused on the raising of children. Presumptively, same-sex marriage will become law, as the coalition government has already decided to make it so. This 12-week consultation period that began Thursday is strictly to consider how the law will be implemented. Meanwhile, Pope Benedict XVI echoed the comments of Britain's church leaders before a group of visiting American bishops this past week. He urged those bishops to defend marriage. The pontiff said sexual differences cannot be dismissed as irrelevant to the definition of marriage. Defending marriage as a social reality is ultimately a question of justice, he said. More broadly, he noted that the U.S. is deeply affected by the contemporary crisis of marriage and the family, and more generally, of the Christian vision of human sexuality. The Catholic population worldwide continues to grow. According to the latest edition of the Pontifical Yearbook, in 2010, the Catholic Church added 15 million new faithful and experienced her 10th straight year of growth in the priesthood. The world's Catholic population is now just shy of 1.2 billion, with more than 412,000 priests. Catholic numbers have increased most in Asia and Africa, with the number of priests on those continents also rising significantly. However, there were two areas of concern. Female religious continued their decline worldwide, as did the lay faithful and religious populations in Europe. And finally, from his blood-red loafers to his Saturno hat, Pope Benedict has distinguished himself as a pope of tradition and style. Now, according to reports, the pontiff will soon have his own custom-made cologne. Italian scent maker Silvana Casoli has reportedly been commissioned to create a new fragrance for the pontiff. Casoli told the UK's Guardian that the scent is meant to reflect the Pope's love of the forests and animals in his native Bavaria, as well as peace and tranquility. The fake fragrance is infused with lemon tree blossom and the aroma of spring grass. Don't expect to see the cologne at the fragrance counter anytime soon. Casoli said she's made a pact of secrecy with the Pope and that she would never repeat the same fragrance for another customer. Good thing. And finally, don't forget about our new contest in honor of Mother Angelica's 89th birthday in April. I want to hear from you. Let me know how Mother Angelica has touched or changed your life. We've gotten some beautiful notes already. Send your stories to Raymond@RaymondArroyo.com. Put Mother in the subject line. The author of the best stories will receive a free copy of one of my books on Mother Angelica, and we may read one of your letters on air. Be sure to send those Mother Angelica remembrances to Raymond@RaymondArroyo.com. When we return, we'll hear the latest on the bishop's efforts to restore conscience protections to the healthcare law and more. Bishop William Lowry joins us when The World Over Live continues. Stay right there.
Now, once again, Raymond Arroyo.
Welcome back to The World Over Live. The USCCB's Administrative Committee met in Washington, D.C. this week. High on the agenda was their ongoing battle with the federal government over the contraceptive sterilization mandate in the new health care law. My first guest tonight was at the helm of those discussions, serving as the chairman of the USCCB's Ad Hoc Committee on Religious Liberty. He's also the Bishop of Bridgeport, Connecticut. I spoke with Bishop William Lowry earlier here in studio. I know you've had a very busy week. The administrative board of the Bishops' Conference met, and part of your discussions was about this HHS mandate and how you all would respond as a body. Now, going into this meeting, there were some reports that the bishops were divided. They weren't sure of the way to go, what strategy it should be. What was the final determination of the meeting?
First of all, I think we entered the meeting very unified, very clear that defending our religious liberty in view of the HHS mandate was an imperative, very clear on our principles, and we came out at the end with a very strong statement that reiterates our unity, our determination, and in the process to be true to our teaching, true to our institutions, and true to all of the individuals who want to live their lives also in accord with moral principles and religious values.
Was there any discussion about the partisanship? We keep hearing that in columns that some are writing now, some naysayers and critics of the bishop saying, oh, they're being too partisan, you're not being civil enough. You would say what?
Well, look, we're doing this in an election year. We didn't choose the timing. The timing was chosen for us. Yeah. We do not see this as a Republican issue or a Democratic issue, but rather as an American issue. Are we speaking acerbically or unreasonably? No. Are we speaking forthrightly and we hope courageously with God's grace?
Yeah, and people should bear in mind, these conscience clauses were part of the status quo in federal statutes reaching back from the founding of the country. This is nothing new you're asking for.
No, we are looking for what has obtained in federal law for a long time, for generations. In the tax code, the federal tax code, ERISA, various other places in federal law, the rights and the requirements of religious bodies adequately recognized. It's been quite workable until now. Yeah. And it should not really be touched, but unfortunately it is being touched.
And the centerpiece, the flashpoint, if you will, is this HHS mandate, which came out of Health and Human Services. It's part of the health care bill, and it compels employers and even religious-affiliated employers to purchase contraceptives for their employees or those as part of their plan. There's something you all pointed out that I think bears some attention. This is in the statement that was released from the Administrative Committee, and it reads, an unwarranted government definition of religion. The mandate includes an extremely narrow definition of what HHS deems a religious employer deserving exemption. Employers who, among other things, must hire and serve primarily those of their own faith. We're deeply concerned about this new definition of who we are as people of faith and what constitutes our ministry. Why are you so concerned about that?
It is not for the government, to define the identity and mission of any religion or religious organizations. If religious freedom means anything, it means our own right to our God-given right to say who we are and what our ministries are. This so-called exemption actually is a stricture placed upon the church, defining us simply as hiring only our own members, serving only our own members, and existing only to inculcate our faith. Well, as a matter of fact, we're not an inward-looking church. Yeah. We're here to serve the common good, to serve our own members, but also people of all faiths and of none. Yeah. According to this definition, Jesus and the apostles would not have qualified, and certainly not Mother Teresa.
No, because they went out. I mean, especially Mother Teresa, you think of her, she didn't check the baptismal card before she served people.
Deus Caritas Est, the beautiful encyclical of Pope Benedict, sees three essential elements to the Church's life and ministry: preaching the Word and teaching the faith, celebrating the sacraments, and then diaconia. And diaconia, the works of education, charity, and social service, flow from the preaching of the Word and the celebration of the sacraments, but not according to the HHS definition.
Yeah. And that definition of a religious employer and a religious organization or affiliated organization, you're concerned because of the precedent that would establish, were you to sit by and let this pass.
Sure, it would reappear and reappear in federal law. It was actually gotten from an ACLU definition. That's the ACLU definition of us. And it was first tried out in California. And now it has been imported into federal regulations. So of course we're concerned it's going to reappear. The other thing we don't like about it is having made us look at ourselves in these four very narrow strictures, then it sorts us out. It says there are some of your ministries are really religious, and we'll exempt you. But then you have a second category of non-exempt religious institutions like colleges, universities, charities.
Yeah.
The government has no business defining us and no business sorting out our institutions. Nor is there any understanding of the complexity of how the Catholic Church is organized, nor of the tremendous good it serves.
Bishop Lohr, you've seen the spin out there that's been coming from the media apparatus, that you are engaged in a war on women, you're trying to keep contraceptives from women, you're imposing your morality on women. You would say what?
I would say, first of all, the Church is an institution which defends the human dignity, the human rights of everyone, man, woman, and child, poor, rich, in between. And secondly, I would say that our church-run insurance plans are among the best anywhere. All of us speak, we bishops, not simply as policy wonks, because we've been accused of that,
Yes.
but rather we're employers. And many of those who choose to work for us are women. We have good health care plans. We are upfront about what the teaching of the Church is and how that teaching is reflected in our health care plans and indeed in all aspects of our institutional life. We have no trouble recruiting and retaining women in working for us.
When this HHS regulation was announced, which mandates that you and other religious organizations purchase contraceptives, abortifacients, as well as sterilization, make that available via the healthcare plan or your healthcare plan, there was an outcry. And the president then went back and he created what he called an accommodation, which basically says the insurance company will pay for it. Don't worry, Bishop, your conscience is now clear. Some Catholic groups came out, including the Catholic Health Association, and said, this is good for us. It protects our religious liberty. What do you do with these groups, Bishop?
Well, look, in the heat of battle, it's possible that one takes a position prematurely. As Cardinal Dolan said, you pop the cork on the champagne bottle too quickly. In the light of day, when you start looking at what the accommodation is, namely a promise at a news conference, while the final rule remains unchanged in the Federal Registry, you realize you got questions. And then you begin looking at how you're organized, recognizing that most church entities are self-insured, or there are religious insurers, Or if you buy if you're fully insured and you're paying premiums to an insurance company, you understand that the insurance company is not going to, in its largesse, pay for these things. You got questions.
Yeah.
And what we bishops have done is to say, we have questions of principle and questions of practicality. We don't think that the so-called accommodation works on either level.
Now, you have indicated that you would like to see talks resume with the administration. What is the status of those talks? Are they ongoing between the bishops and the administration?
Well, first of all, of course we're willing to talk. Of course we're willing to share both our principles and our practical objections, and most of all in those talks, to bring to the table the need for the administration to robustly protect and defend our God-given rights, and certainly as religions and religious institutions, but also the rights of individuals, and also the rights of organizations that are not owned by the church, but which exist to serve the mission of the church. EWTN might be one of those. And so we also think, and I've said this publicly, that instead of dealing with the Catholic Church in a segmented way, having the bishops in this corner, healthcare in that corner, Catholic higher education and still another corner, all the stakeholders, or at least representatives thereof, need to be around the table with the administration.
But those talks aren't going on right now.
They're sort of fits and starts, a talk here, a talk there. It is hard to see what the future is. Right now, they do not look promising.
There's another point, you make it in this statement. You consider this a violation of personal civil rights. How so?
Well, first of all, religious liberty is an endowment by the Creator. Our own founding documents recognize this. Our church teaching, Dignitatis Humanae, recognizes this. The Catechism of the Catholic Church recognizes it. So before we even speak about the rights of religious institutions, and we must speak about those robustly and have done so, we must recognize that everyone has a right to live his or her life in accordance with his or her religious and moral conviction. So if you are a private employer, we believe that you should have a right to bring those truths and values to your business.
There's still a lot of division, though, in the Catholic Church over contraceptives when you just isolate that. How do you hold the church together? Because you need a majority, you need a majority of the people to be behind you on this, or it all falls apart.
At the most basic level, even those who disagree with the church's teaching will say, well, we may not find ourselves able to live up to this teaching, or we may not understand it, we may even reject it. We don't want the government messing with our church. Let's put it down into the most basic language and maybe forget the highfalutin stuff. We don't want the government messing with our church. If we Catholics want to have a fight about that, fine. But the reality is there are polls showing that there is greater acceptance of the church's teaching, even the teaching of contraception, than perhaps we thought to be the case.
Initially.
This is a teaching moment.
This mandate is only the tip of the iceberg. I mean, this is just dealing with contraceptives and sterilization. We now have news coming forward of an abortion surcharge, a $1 abortion surcharge for anyone in a healthcare plan that covers abortion, and a lot of them will. And you'll be told of that when you register, and then you won't be told again. It's essentially an abortion kitty. Does this concern you, and all the rules and regulations yet to be written?
Sure. This is very complex, and we have to remain vigilant. Right now we're dealing with the so-called preventive services, the three: abortifacient, sterilization, contraception. Essential services like hospitalization, blood pressure medicine, etc. That's all been bumped down to the states, by the way. And it seems to me that we will find regulations there at the federal level and at the state level, and we're all going to have to be very, very, very vigilant.
Your committee, your ad hoc committee on religious liberty, is about to issue a broad document that will, it's sort of an overarching primer on religious liberty. I imagine it will take into account some of the other flashpoints we've been seeing, the immigration battle in Birmingham and other issues. What do you hope to accomplish with that document?
Well, the first thing about the document is to educate and to catechize, because for many, many years, we Americans, not just Catholics, but Americans in general, have taken their liberties for granted. We're the land of the free and the home of the brave, and that we are. And we love our country. And we love it so much and we trust it so much that we can't imagine that fundamental liberties are being compromised by other claims, sometimes for good things and sometimes for bad things, by laws, by court decisions. So what we're doing here is pressing the reset button. We're saying, wait a minute, let's go back and look philosophically, and let's look historically at where human freedoms and religious freedom comes from. Doesn't come from the state, comes from God.
I want you to comment. We had a lawyer on the show, Dorinda Bordley, a few weeks ago, and she talked about something she discovered in the law itself. There is an exemption for the Amish because of their religious beliefs. They don't have to buy insurance. Yet, the Catholic Church gets no exemption at all for any reason. Is that a double standard, and do you think that may be the linchpin that brings this law down in the courts?
Well, I'm just a country bishop from Connecticut, so I don't know.
Oh, you're being awfully humble. I've known you a long time, Bishop.
So I don't know what will bring it down in the courts ultimately, but I would have to say this. The fact that there are exemptions, the fact that there are grandfathered plans, all of this goes toward the view, a well-considered view, that the government knows in its heart that it does not have a compelling interest to force Catholic institutions to violate their teachings by funding and facilitating these so-called preventive services. If they can make these exceptions, if they can grandfather plans, then I think they forfeited their claim to a compelling governmental interest. And that's the standard they have to meet under the Religious Freedom Restoration Act.
Right.
And I would also say under the First Amendment.
Final question. What particular tactics are you all willing to employ? And I'm talking about public protests, the media, etc. Is there anything you have on the table now? I mean, we see the courts already.
First thing is educate. Oh, no, I'm wrong. First thing is to pray. We're bishops. And the first instinct here is to pray. And so you'll see in that foundational document when it comes out, a prayer for religious liberty, the suggestion for times and places when we should pray. We're going to be asking parishes if they would do a prayer for religious liberty every Sunday. We need to get on our knees and say the rosary for religious liberty. Prayer is the most fundamental thing. Without me, you can do nothing. And with God, all things are possible. Number one. Number two, to teach and catechize. We bishops are first and foremost teachers. And so there is the teaching of the church, and there is the teaching of our wonderful founding documents. Got to be clear. Thirdly, we look at all three branches of government, executive branch, the courts, and the legislature, and we're going to, as we have been doing, we are seeking relief in all three. And we will pursue those things to the greatest extent possible. Moving beyond that, it's hard to see what that might be like, but I can tell you this. The one thing we don't want to do is shut down. We don't want to stop our ministries. We're going to defend them tooth and nail, and whatever form it will take, we'll find ourselves standing in the breach. But we're going to do everything in our power to win protection of our God-given religious rights in our government.
Up next, Father Robert Sirico joins us to comment on the latest headlines and the cultural stories of the week. We'll also comment, or he'll comment rather, on the interview you just saw. The World Over Live continues in a moment. Stay right there.
Now, once again, Raymond Arroyo.
My next guest is the president of the Acton Institute for the Study of Religion and Liberty. He's a regular World Over contributor. He's also the author of the forthcoming book, The End of Freedom, coming from Regnery on May 21st. Please welcome Father Robert Sirico back to the program.
Great to be
back.
back.
Great to see you,
Thank
Father
you.
Robert. And if you have a question, give us a ring, 1-800-221-9460 in the U.S. and internationally, 205-271-2980, or drop us an email, worldover@ewtn.com. We will get to your questions, I promise. I want first your reaction to the interview with Bishop Lurie, particularly the bishop's concern about religious organizations and the definition of religious organizations.
This is kind of the heart of it, isn't it? Because what you have here is the government telling us what our religion is and isn't. Mm-hmm. And it really goes back to this notion of the freedom of worship, and not just the freedom of religion. We, as a church, believe in the incarnation. We believe in building institutions. We believe that our work in hospitals is an extension of our encounter with Jesus Christ, who comes to us in the disguise of the sick, the poor, the abandoned. That's why we ran orphanages and all of the rest. And now this state that wants to subsume everything into itself, as Benedict says in one of his encyclicals, is really going to threaten man as such. And I think Bishop Lurie and the bishops in general are courageous. Let me just take a moment here. We've at times, and even I have in other forums, have been critical of the Bishops' Conference on a variety of debatable issues where good people can have different ideas. And I know that a lot of your viewers, have, judging by the email that I've gotten, share those concerns with the bishops. Yeah. This is the time to stand by our bishops. They're acting courageously. They're acting precisely in their role as bishops because what they're doing is not engaging in politics here. They're engaging in a defense of the faith and in a defense of the institutions that our ancestors in this country have enabled us to build. And so the bishops have been utterly courageous, and I think that Bishop Lurie was very articulate.
Well, the unity here is amazing.
Yes, it really is.
And when you're dealing with 300 people from all across the country, getting unity on just about anything is awfully hard.
Very hard.
And this is courageous. Look, they're marching in the face of the federal government who's saying, this is how it's going to be, this is what you will do, or you simply can't offer health insurance for your employees.
This is quite unprecedented. And as he said, I think it's worth underscoring, and everyone needs to say this over and over again. This is not about contraception. That's an important subject for us Catholics. And we need to teach well on that. But this is not about that. This is about our right to practice our religion. And if we're threatened in this, it's not just Catholics who are going to be threatened. It's Baptists and Adventists and Mormons and Jews and all of the other people who have other kinds of institutions, not just hospitals.
In the statement it reads, this is not about access to contraception, which is ubiquitous and inexpensive, even when it is not provided by the church at hand or with the church's funds. This is not about the religious freedom of Catholics only, but also of those who recognize that their cherished beliefs may be next on the hook.
That's right. And it's not just the churches. As Bishop Lurie said, this is about people who should have the right to express their beliefs in their work. They build their enterprises, and now they're being curtailed by bureaucrats and regulations telling people how they can and can't. You know what's odd about this is a move against diversity. This is an administration that celebrates diversity, but now they want to squash the voices of diversity. The best best contribution we can make to diversity in this country is to be ourselves, to be who we are as Catholics.
Yeah, and particularly when this has been part of the social service network in this country
The largest,
for centuries.
The largest in this country.
Yeah.
It's amazing. And not just that, in the book that I'm writing, I did some research. The Christian church invented the hospital as we know it today. And so this goes back centuries. Religion has always been involved with health care.
The care of man.
That's right.
The care of man,
That's
his
right.
soul and his body.
Exactly.
The other curious thing, as you bring it up, this week a story broke that you had the one of the departments of the government giving a permit to an Indian tribe to kill bald eagles. Why? Religious exemptions.
Right.
Now, it's a federal crime to kill a bald eagle, but they got this pass to do so.
They need
why
the feathers
why do we
for
have
the
it?
ceremonies?
Yeah, for the various relics they need
Sure.
for their rituals.
Right.
Why is that allowed
Right.
a religious exemption or that group? And yet, this huge majority of people who've been doing such good work for
But
so
you see,
long
this
are
is
denied.
exactly why. You see, this is why the American Indians, why the Amish, why other small groups can be allowed, because these represent acts of worship, not institutions that can influence the moral tenor of society as a whole. And I think this is really evidence of the war on religion.
Yeah, well, I wish the Wildlife and Fisheries Service were running the HHS department. We might be in better shape. This is a bite from the president. He was asked about this war on religion and how he feels about it. Listen.
Well, I find this very puzzling because my first real job out of college was working with churches in low-income communities, trying to make sure that the social gospel was made real, that people were getting help, sending their kids to school and being able to feed their families and having an opportunity to find a job. And I know what faith-based groups all across the country have been able to do in terms of providing help, which is why this administration, this White House, has expanded cooperation with faith-based groups on a whole range of issues, both domestic and international.
Given the bishop's unified outcry this week, and no doubt what we'll hear from the laity in rallies
yes.
and marches planned in the coming days, will this hurt the president, and does that justification wash with those voters, Catholic voters and voters of faith?
No, I don't think that it washes. The whole social gospel element in the various churches is the shrinking element in the mainstream churches and even in the Catholic churches. The president was not involved with churches as churches. He was involved with them as political organizing. And so it's a different kind
Catholic
of thing.
charities, we might add,
Yes,
in Chicago.
yes, exactly. And the chickens have come home to roost, as we see now. Do I think, my hunch is, I'm not a prognosticator, but my hunch is that the administration will back off this, or there will be a bill passed or a judicial act made that will push it off. But we have to remember that this is part of a whole broader problem of the invasion of the state, of the government, of the bureaucratic mentality into the private sector of our society. And this is why I have been crying for a long time that it is very dangerous to be accepting so many subsidies from the government, because once they have you, once they kind of own you, then they can pull some strings. And this is a very uncomfortable situation for a lot of people.
And it's going to be much worse if these Catholic institutions close.
Oh, I think so.
Yeah. Let's go to Carmel in New York. Go ahead, Carmel. What's your question?
Hi, Raymond. I'm glad that Father Sirico was just talking about unity, because one of the messages that's out there is that our bishops are very unified, and the church and we laity want to be behind them 100%. But every time Sister Carol Keating opens her mouth, she shows that the Catholic Church is divided on all of these issues. I'd like to know why she can't be removed, and people like her can't be removed from their positions. I mean, I know they're interested in her soul and they want to, win her back, but
you heard I brought it up with Bishop Laurie earlier, Sister Carol Keating, who's the president of the Catholic Health Association. It is confusing to Catholics when they hear, particularly a nun, a sister who is in charge of this organization, essentially the trade organization for Catholic hospitals. Right. What do you say to this call?
Well, I say this problem is immensely complicated, and it's complicated because a generation ago, maybe even longer, these institutions began and grew up. A lot of them took on professional social workers, professional lobbyists, and they became part of the whole mentality of the government, so that many of these institutions have long ago only kept a kind of facade of Catholic identity, doing some good work, certainly things that they were doing, but the culture, the thinking within these organizations. And I think what you see in Sister Carol is an example of the social gospel that has been kind of emptied of the historic gospel of Jesus Christ, who came not just to save people's bodies, but their souls as well.
I want to move on to this crisis, this controversy that has erupted here in Maryland, where Father Marcel Guarnizo, a priest, denied communion to a woman that came forward at her mother's funeral. The woman before the funeral said she was a lesbian. I guess word had leaked out that she was also a Buddhist, and he denied her communion.
Yes.
Since then, his faculties have been suspended. This has been a huge controversy on the blogosphere, people saying Father Guarnizo just protected the sacrament, this is what he should do. I've been reading pieces from very well-respected canonists, certainly no slouches when it comes to enforcing Canon 915, which says if you're in grave manifest sin, you have to forbid these people.
Grave manifest in public or
persistent,
persistent.
And you're right. I'll read you the qualifications. Obstinate, manifest, grave, and sinful conduct. And they have to be persistent in it. Ed Peters, the renowned canonist, has suggested that in this case, the woman didn't meet the standard of Canon 915.
She didn't. Canon 915 pertains to the obligation of the minister of the Holy Eucharist, the priest, in most cases, the normal minister, and what he has to do. And you notice that there are these qualifying clauses. Now, a politician would fall under those because they are public. Presumably, there's been persistent. At a funeral, which is always, ask any priest, it's always a very delicate situation when you walk in, aside from this. Evidently, this woman came to him in the sacristy, and she's an activist, as we know from her blog, and more or less put him on the spot, and Father decided to withhold communion from her. The other canon, though, 916, pertains to the obligation of the person presenting him or herself for communion. And this is what is applicable to her. She should not have come. And now this, of course, is problematic because our catechesis, the whole culture, and evidently this woman doesn't respect the code of canon law, the hierarchy of the church. She's dabbled in Buddhism and all of the rest of it. So I think that Father got himself into a really unfortunate situation. My heart goes out to him.
Yeah, because his intention, no doubt, was to protect the sacrament,
of course.
which is a valid concern.
Yes, but the way we protect the sacrament, our obligation is to do what the Church asks us to do, and the Church asks us to do that in our liturgical manuals and in canon law. And there's a lack of clarification about which canon applied, evidently, and so I think it was a mistake. I don't think he should be being punished for it. I don't know the man. I don't know the details of it.
Well, and the Archdiocese of Washington, just to be clear, they have suspended his faculties here, but they've said it's related to other behaviors, his pastoral interaction with members of the staff. They said that is the cause of it, and not the denial of communion.
Well,
we don't know all the facts surrounding this case, but it is I think it's an illustrative point and a good time to talk about this Canon 915, which really pertains to public figures who are giving public scandal by their
priests have to be very cautious about withholding communion. I mean, any number of times I'm giving out communion, somebody comes up and they're dressed in an inappropriate way, or you see that they're not attentive, or they don't know how to receive communion, or any number of things. I stopped a guy once who had gum in his mouth, and I said to him, very gently, I said, "You have to take the gum out of your mouth." And he was afterwards his whole family came over and said, "We're so sorry he had the gum in his mouth, he had forgotten." I mean, there were good group of people. I said, well, you don't come to church with gum in your mouth. You're supposed to be fasting an hour before you receive communion. But anyway, these things happen, and we just have to be very careful. And this was an unenviable situation that Father was in.
No, it was a difficult situation. Let's move to this presidential race. Rick Santorum swept 2 states, Mississippi and Alabama, winning the vote largely of the evangelical majorities in both places. 73, almost 80% in Mississippi are evangelicals.
Yes.
Your thoughts on how interesting it is that a Roman Catholic is garnering that sort of support from evangelicals. A few generations ago, this would have been unthinkable.
Oh, unthinkable. Well, you know, there was just a poll that said that the majority of people in the South don't believe that President Obama is a Christian. The majority believe that he's a Muslim. I wonder if the majority don't know that Santorum is a Catholic. Not that, I mean, I don't know how they would, but I think he resonates with evangelicals. That's what I'm trying to say.
Well, and the culture has pushed evangelicals and Catholics closer, I think, also.
Yes, oh yes, and the culture wars, in a sense, you know, where we've come together in front of abortion clinics and are concerned about all of the, you know, the whole marriage disputes and things like this. And this issue, you know, Chuck Colson said we're all Catholics now. So I think that this evidences, at least in the South, that some people want a very clear moral leader who has a consistent life of living that, and I think that's why they chose him over Romney.
We have been asking Rick Santorum to appear on the show because of scheduling conflicts. It hasn't worked out. He will be on soon. I did interview him on radio this week. This is a little clip. We talked about the charge that Mitt Romney is making that he, Rick Santorum, voted for a bill that funded Planned Parenthood. Listen.
He's mentioned that line again and again. Rick Santorum voted for Planned Parenthood. I see it in emails that come into my show, and he's using it in a lot of these ads in Alabama, in Mississippi. It seems to be taking some effect. How do you combat that?
He donated to Planned Parenthood. He gave his own personal money. I voted for a large, big appropriation bills of which none of the money could be used for funding abortions that every pro-life member of the Congress voted for. So if you're going to say Henry Hyde and Chris Smith and all the other great pro-lifers are not pro-life because they voted for a large budget, would include a couple $1 million for
Title 10.
What it was for family planning dollars for Planned Parenthood. It's absurd.
Does that answer satisfy?
It doesn't satisfy me. I mean, I understand that that's the way when you have an omnibus bill, you know, it's everything and all that. I think that's why you need to have some kind of line item veto. Of course, that would only apply to the president. But to break these things out so that you don't have to vote for things. Because his answer to Ron Paul in the debate was, well, then I voted for chastity, I forget what it was,
funding
some other
in
good
a separate
program.
bill.
Well, I mean, this is the problem with government being so big and presuming that it gets to do everything. And so you're kind of sucked into this thing of where you're voting for one thing in order to get another thing. And this is why we have these deficits ballooning.
We have so many emails coming in, and I will get to them momentarily. I want to move on to one other issue here related to Rick Santorum. There was an item that showed up on his website.
Yes.
And it says he makes a promise. If elected, he promises to vigorously enforce laws that prohibit distribution of hardcore obscene pornography on the internet, cable, satellite TV, hotel and motel TV, in retail shops, and through the mail or common carrier. A laudable goal.
Oh, absolutely.
Politically.
This is a huge industry. It, from a pastoral perspective.
Billions of dollars.
People are addicted to this. It destroys families. It destroys people.
Yeah.
Aside from objectifying women.
And children and everybody else.
Right,
I mean, it's corrosive in every way.
There's no debate about that.
Here's the question. Given that they have tried, the media and some of his opponents, to caricature Rick Santorum as sort of a moral crusader, is that a plank that you should then advertise and run on?
Well, I think it's unnuanced, certainly. I mean, how would you go about doing this?
How do you enforce it? Is the question.
Yes, how are you going to enforce it? I'm of the opinion that it's better to have these things enforced locally and not federally, because the moment you get into federally funding something, you get into this kind of omnibus thing again. So, okay, I'll vote for this if you vote for that. So you'll be voting for and against pornography.
Yeah.
Like we were subsidizing tobacco and we were
against
banned,
tobacco,
you know. So I don't think that's the way to go. And from a political point of view, I think as many people are going to be attracted to Santorum because of his clear stand and understanding of the what pornography does.
Well, and there are anti-obscenity laws on the books that have been unenforced, and that's I think his argument.
Right.
But whether it plays politically or not, I don't know. And in a general election, I think it's tough. I want to go to some of these emails. People are writing in. This is an interesting one from Michael. The forces of the left seem to have succeeded in casting the HHS mandate as a woman's issue.
Yeah.
Do the bishops have, you think, a solid and muscular plan to debunk this and make it clear that this is a First Amendment issue, asks Michael.
I think this is up to us. You know, we can't, the bishops will do what they can do. There's another document that they're in the course of preparing now. But I think there are 300 bishops in this country.
Yeah.
But there are, how many million, 60-something million Catholics in this country? This is very clearly an issue of religious freedom, a First Amendment issue. It's part of our heritage, and everyone should be involved in it. So wear that muscular plan, not the bureaucracy over here.
Again, there's that misunderstanding. Everybody wants the bishops to suddenly march on Washington.
I mean, I think it's great.
The people are supposed to march on Washington.
I think it's great that they are leading the way. But my guess is that everyone in their parish this Sunday will have the names of their local officials, their congresspeople. They'll have material. The bishop's website is the best repository of articles on the subject from a variety of perspectives. So we have to be doing this. I ask your viewers, make 5 or 10 copies and put it in the laundromat and put it at a telephone. Well, nobody uses telephone booths anymore. But, you know, in the doctor's office, you just spread them around. Be evangelical about it.
I've linked the bishop's statement on my Facebook page because it is difficult navigating that site. The bishops, they have a lot of information there, but I find it circuitous trying to find a document.
Well, you just have a 16-year-old do it for you, and then
I get my son, my almost 13-year-old son, he'll do it. Let's go to the phones. Ken from North Carolina. Go ahead, Ken. We have 2 minutes. What's your question?
Okay, I was just wondering, I don't know how many Catholic hospitals are or social service agencies are in this country, but how does Obama plan to, justify all their closings and putting the burden on all these other hospitals with the expense and such?
It's a good question.
It's a very good question. 1 out of 6 patients in hospitals are in Catholic institutions. But I think 2 things would happen. The first, and we've already seen the preliminary to it, in Illinois, when there was an orphanage, or it was actually an agency to place children in foster care. When they were challenged, I think it was placing them in with homosexual couples, they simply changed the name of the group and kept going. So because of that thing we were talking about earlier, we've already eroded so much of the Catholic identity in many of these institutions.
And
we've already lost them.
Same thing in Boston. We've closed down the orphanage.
We've already lost them, so you won't see it. I think that's one of the things that would happen. The other thing, and this would play right into the hands of the federal government and those who have central planning on the brain, and that is that they would take them all over.
Or they just go all secular, which we're seeing.
Yeah, they go secular.
Father Robert Sirico, thank you so much. We're out of time. I wish we had more time. For more on the work of Father Robert Sirico and the Acton Institute, visit acton.org. Before we go tonight, on Friday, March 23rd, concerned Americans in 100 cities across the nation will take to the streets and voice opposition to the HHS mandate that forces religious institutions to offer contraception, sterilization, and abortion-inducing drugs to their employees. It's called Stand Up for Religious Freedom. Locations for the rallies include Washington, D.C., New York, Chicago, Los Angeles, and many others. For more information, visit standupforreligiousfreedom.org. It's all one word, standupforreligiousfreedom.com. That is all the time we have, but the show continues on Facebook and Twitter. Go to RaymondArroyo.com. The Twitter and Facebook pages are linked on the left-hand side of the site. There you'll find the latest news, some commentary, and I can assure you, things you won't find anywhere else. Don't forget to send your Mother Angelica stories to Raymond at RaymondArroyo.com. Until next week, we'll be scouting the world over for all that is seen and unseen. On behalf of the staff of EWTN News, I'm Raymond Arroyo. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time, and the prompter will roll faster, I promise. Bye now.